As they are out there grazing, you will see them grazing together and intermingling that way. Hi everybody, I'm Christine Hernandez, Livestock Manager here for Heifer USA. And if you were able to watch our previous ranch tour video, I talked about creating a Flerd. So what is a Flerd? So a Flerd is when you take a herd and a flock and you put them together. So what we're doing here at Heifer Ranch is we have our sheep flock that you see behind me, and now they are grazing with our cattle herd, which is over here, and they are in the same paddock. Why would we want to create a Flerd? Before we get to that, let's talk about what we were doing before we created our Flerd. We were doing the leader-follower program, which is very common when you have multi-species grazing. Here at Heifer Ranch, we had our sheep leading our cattle. So the sheep always had access to a paddock. First, they would go in and they're allowed to graze what they wanted, and then we moved them off and the cattle went into that paddock and cleaned up that pasture for us. It's more common for the cattle herd to actually lead the sheep when you're doing multi-species grazing. And the reason why we did it opposite of that, where we had our sheep leading our cattle, is because we do grass-fed sheep here at Heifer Ranch. And so we have our lambs and we need them to get to their processing weight, which is about 100 to 120 pounds by the time they're 8 months old. So we have that need for those lambs to go out there and graze the best grass and the best forbs that we have so that they can get to that processing weight on time. That's still true for our cattle herd, but when you're doing grass-fed cattle, that's going to take you up to 2 years or a little bit longer to get a steer finished out on grass. So for us, our sheep had a bigger need to get out there and get that better forage first to make sure they were ready to go at the 8 months of age. We were doing the cattle leading the sheep prior to switching that around, but what we found is that the cattle will go out there, they'll graze what they want. The cattle are mostly going to be eating that grass, maybe a little bit of broadleaves and some forbs, but mostly that grass. And they would take what they want, and when we put our sheep in following them, the sheep were relatively unhappy with what the cattle left for them. And so we decided to switch that to where the sheep will go in. Their diet's going to be about 50% grass. A lot more forbs and broadleaves will be consumed by the sheep. They graze differently, so the sheep can manipulate that grass more and eat closer to the ground and nibble, where the cattle have to go in and use their tongue, wrap around the grass, and pull it that way. So having the sheep go in first, they could get what they want, and there was still plenty left for the cattle to come in and clean that up and have their impact on our paddocks. Something that we had to our advantage prior to putting the Flerd together was, since we were doing that leader-follower program, the sheep and cattle were already sharing a fence line, so they were used to each other within a certain distance. Before we put the animals together, we still had our temporary fencing set up, and so we used 2 strands of temporary fencing. We have a top cattle line, and then we also have a bottom sheep line. So we can still be doing the same type of fencing, and everyone is just together and they move at the same time. When we put them together, we moved the sheep into the new paddock, gave them about a day, and then we brought our cattle herd in. We gave them about a 6 to 7 acre paddock, so they had plenty of space to get away from each other if they wanted, but then they could slowly start mingling as they were grazing. We made the management decision to create our Flerd this summer for a few different reasons. So first, it's going to decrease our labor, moving everyone at the same time. Another benefit to having the Flerd is the impact we can make on their paddock. So before having them separate, the sheep would make a little bit of impact, the cattle would come in and have most of that impact. But now that they're together, they can all create that impact together since we give them a smaller paddock, about 3 acres in size. And then we can move everyone off and we can increase that rest time and that recovery time within that paddock. So it gives our time management. So that will give us better time management of our paddocks and of our forage recovering. Another benefit of having a Flerd is it allows us to be more adaptive in our grazing. So we can change the number of acres that we give to the Flerd and then how much time they're in that paddock so that we can do what is best for our forage and for our soil. With all of those benefits that we get from having a Flerd, we also have some cons. So just a few cons that we have already experienced is when we are trying to get one species out. For example, we had to booster our lambs the other day, and so we had to get our sheep flock out of our cattle herd, and that was a little difficult because the cows thought it was also time to move, so everyone was trying to come out of the gate at the same time. Another con would be the amount of time for the livestock guardian dogs to get used to the cattle and how their relationship is working. And another con would be the differences that they need with their mineral. So sheep should not have very much copper in their diet due to copper toxicity, and the cattle actually need copper in that mineral mix. And since we are doing the cafeteria style mineral feeder for the cattle, we actually took copper out of that for the time that the Flerd will be together, and we have the sheep mineral in a separate feeder available for them. So far, the Flerd has been together for about 3 weeks and they are doing a great job. Usually when we come out here, when they're resting and ruminating, the cattle will be in their own group and then the sheep will be off by themselves. As they are out there grazing, you will see them grazing together and intermingling that way. Our management plan is to have the Flerd stay together for the entire summer and into the fall. We will be pulling our ewes out for breeding beginning of October, and our plan is to leave our market lambs still with the cattle, so that will just be a smaller version of our Flerd. If you raise grass-fed cattle and sheep on your farm, I highly recommend you giving the Flerd a try. If you have any questions, leave them down in the comments and we'll get back to you. If you haven't checked out our whole ranch tour, you can find it here or any of our other Heifer USA tours here. Thank you, have a good day.